winter, 1939. The temperature falls below 30 degrees. Snow does not just cover this land, it swallows it whole. Along the eastern border of Finland, a nation of barely 3.5 million people braces for an invasion no one believes it can survive. Snow falls quietly here, indifferent to what is coming. The same snow that will soon decide the fate of two armies. This is home to a people who have shaped their lives around this unforgiving land for generations, long before the world ever took notice. The Soviet Union crosses the border with over 1 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, and an air force that blackens the sky above them. Against them stands a Finnish army a fraction of that size, underfed, under-equipped, and outnumbered on nearly every front of this war. The world expects this war to last only days. Historians will later call what happens next nothing short of impossible. In the frozen forests near the Kollaa River, something begins to happen that no war planner on either side accounted for. The land itself becomes a weapon. Deep snow slows tank columns to a crawl, foot by foot, mile by frozen mile. Endless pine forest hides movement the open steppe never could, and in that white silence, something begins to change. A different kind of soldier begins to emerge here. One who fights not with numbers, but with patience and stillness. Soviet troops advancing through these woods start to whisper about a presence hidden somewhere among the trees around them. Men vanish without a sound, without a muzzle flash, without any warning at all, as if the forest itself had taken them. No one sees him. No one hears him. They only find what is left behind in the silence after. The Finns have a name for this terrain that seems to swallow their enemies whole, mile after frozen mile. The Soviets will soon have a name too. A name for the one man who seems to command it all. They will call him Belaya Smert, in their own language, the White Death. Feared long before he was ever truly seen. No official portrait exists of him from these early days. Only rumors, growing more elaborate with every retelling among frightened soldiers. This is his story. The story of one man who became more legend than soldier in the eyes of his enemies. And it is also the story of a war that Finland, by every measure on paper, was never supposed to win. Before we understand the myth, though, we have to understand the man. And where this extraordinary story truly begins. He did not begin as a soldier. He began as something far more ordinary, shaped by this land long before the war arrived. This is where his story begins, not on a battlefield, but on a quiet farm at the edge of the forest. Before he was a soldier, Simo Häyhä was a farmer, a quiet man who spent his life on a small holding near Rautjärvi, close to the border. This was his world long before the war came. Simple, self-sufficient, shaped entirely by the rhythms of the land and the seasons. Winters here demanded patience from everyone. Every task, every chore was a lesson in enduring cold that most people never truly learn. Long before he held a military rifle, he had spent years tracking deer and elk through these same silent forests. He learned to read the smallest details in fresh snow, signs most people would walk past without ever noticing them. He learned to move without disturbing the ground beneath him, to become still in a way that made him almost invisible. Frost formed on branches around him the same way it formed on the world he was about to enter. Quiet, patient, unhurried, his weapon, when the war came, was unremarkable by design. A Finnish-produced rifle, standard in nearly every way except for one deliberate choice. He refused to mount a telescopic sight on his rifle, a decision that seemed, to outsiders, like giving up an advantage. Every choice he made, though, was calculated. Nothing about his method was accidental, and nothing was left to chance. A scope raises a shooter's head higher above the rifle, creating a larger silhouette against the endless white of the snow. Sunlight can catch a lens and flash a shooter's position to the enemy, a fatal mistake in a war fought at this range. In sub-zero cold, a scope's lens fogs and freezes, becoming useless in the very conditions where it was needed most. Iron sights kept his profile low, his silhouette small, his position nearly invisible against the terrain he had known his whole life. They never fogged, they never glinted, they never failed him in weather that failed almost everything else around him. It also meant everything depended entirely on him. No optic to correct his aim, no magnification to close the distance. Just his eyes, his breathing, and years of instinct sharpened long before this war had ever begun to take shape. Soviet snipers carried more advanced equipment, built for precision at range, engineered by a much larger and wealthier military. Häyhä carried something they could not manufacture: patience, built over a lifetime, refined in silence, long before it was ever tested. Through the brutal months of the Winter War, in temperatures that could freeze exposed skin within minutes, he simply continued. He held his position for hours at a time, motionless, waiting for a single moment that most men could never endure. Every shot required total stillness, a discipline built not in training camps, but on quiet hunting trails years earlier. He rarely spoke about what this demanded of him, then or ever. The cold, the waiting, the complete absence of hesitation. His face, half hidden beneath frost and wool, revealed nothing of the war unfolding just beyond the tree line around him. At night, he returned to nothing more than a modest shelter. No comfort, no luxury, only rest before the next long watch. Snow continued to fall the way it always had here, indifferent to the war being fought beneath its endless white surface. From a distance, he was almost impossible to find. A single figure absorbed entirely into a landscape built for concealment. Every piece of his equipment was maintained with total precision, because in this war, a single failure could mean everything. Through the brutal months of the Winter War, Soviet command began to notice a number they at first refused to believe. And by the time the fighting slowed, that number stood at more than 500 confirmed kills in fewer than 100 days. A rifle alone does not create a legend. What made him nearly impossible to find was everything he did before ever firing a shot. He packed snow in front of his firing position, muffling and diffusing the puff of muzzle blast that could otherwise betray his exact location. Every mound he built looked like nothing more than the landscape itself, indistinguishable from drifts formed by wind and weather alone. He built these positions low, nestled into snowbanks, packing them until his outline disappeared entirely into the terrain around him. He kept snow in his mouth, so his breath would not rise as visible vapor in the freezing winter air above him. From above, his hiding places were nearly invisible, blending seamlessly into a landscape that offered no obvious signs of danger. He rarely fired from the same position twice, always moving before the enemy could triangulate where the shot had come from. Soviet patrols crossed these same fields again and again, never once suspecting how closely they were being watched the entire time. For the Red Army, this created something more corrosive than casualties. It created fear that spread faster than any single bullet could. Soldiers refused to move in the open, terrified of a threat they could sense but never actually see coming. Officers began removing the rank insignia from their uniforms, afraid that visible authority now made them a specific and deliberate target. Entire units slowed their advance, unwilling to cross open ground that might be watched by an enemy they could never locate. The forest itself began to feel like the enemy, silent, endless, and impossible to fully secure or control. Soviet command grew increasingly desperate, aware that a single unseen shooter was disrupting operations meant to involve thousands of men. Maps were drawn, patrol routes adjusted, entire strategies reconsidered around the threat of one man they could not identify. A trembling compass needle on a cold map reflected the growing uncertainty spreading through officers trying to plan around him. Soviet troops began referring to him by the name that would outlive the war itself: Belaya Smert, the White Death. Some among them believed he wasn't one man at all, but a unit, a myth built to explain losses too precise to have a single cause. Finnish command understood exactly what he represented and used it, knowing fear could accomplish what numbers alone never could. Eventually, the Soviets brought in artillery, positioning heavy guns along the tree line in an effort to end the threat entirely. Shells were dropped onto suspected positions in the forest, tearing craters into snow that moments earlier had seemed completely undisturbed. Finnish accounts describe him narrowly escaping bombardments meant for him alone, moving just before the ground beneath him erupted. He learned to change position with urgency the instant he sensed his location had been compromised by watching eyes. Every second mattered in these moments. A delay of even a few seconds could mean the difference between escape and death. By dusk, the forest would fall silent again, offering no evidence of what had unfolded within it only hours before. A single set of footprints disappearing into deep snow was often the only trace he ever left behind him. In dugouts nearby, soldiers spoke in hushed tones, trying to make sense of losses that defied every rule of conventional warfare. For a man barely over 5 feet tall, he had become one of the most feared individual soldiers of the century. The scale of what he achieved seemed almost impossible against the vastness of the frozen battlefield surrounding him. Frost continued to settle on branches throughout the forest, indifferent to the war being waged beneath its quiet canopy. At dawn, a single mound at the edge of a clearing offered no hint of what it concealed within it, and still the war continued, vast, brutal, and utterly reshaped by the presence of one man in the trees. By March of 1940, the Winter War was entering its final brutal weeks. Finland's resistance had stunned the world entirely. The weight of Soviet numbers was beginning to close in, even as the man in the forest continued his quiet work. On the 6th of March, his own war came to a sudden and violent end within a single passing moment. An enemy round struck him in the lower left jaw. Some accounts point to a soldier, others to an explosive munition. The wound was catastrophic. He was pulled from the field unconscious, his face devastated by the force of the impact. Those who found him gave him almost no chance of survival, given the severity of what had just happened. He was carried carefully across open snow toward whatever medical help could be found near the shifting front lines. A modest field hospital, lit by lantern light against the darkening forest, became the place where his survival would be decided. He fell on the same day Finland and the Soviet Union began negotiating the peace that would end the war. Doctors worked by lamplight through the night, uncertain whether the man before them would ever wake again. Against every expectation, he survived, his body refusing, it seemed, to let the war simply end without him. He woke from his wounds on the very day peace was formally signed, as if timed by fate itself. The recovery that followed was long and disfiguring, requiring extensive reconstructive surgery over many difficult months. He would carry the physical cost of that single moment with him for the remainder of his life. Yet when asked in later years how he felt about what he had done, he offered no dramatic answer at all. He returned instead to the quiet life he had known before the war, simple, private, and largely unchanged. He went back to farming, to hunting, to breeding dogs, avoiding the spotlight history kept trying to place on him. He rarely spoke about the war in any real detail, even when journalists traveled far to ask him directly. When pressed about the extraordinary number attached to his name, he gave no boast, no embellishment, no elaboration. He explained it simply. He did what he was trained to do, and he did it well. The years passed quietly on that same farm, seasons turning the way they always had, long before the war arrived. His hands, once steady on a rifle stock, grew steady instead around simple daily tasks on the land. He lived a long life, largely removed from the legend that had already outgrown the man who created it. In his later years, he would sit quietly, watching the same forests that had shaped him decades earlier. Age settled into his face the way frost once settled onto branches in the forests of his youth. Simo Häyhä lived until the age of 96, passing away peacefully in the year 2002. He outlived the war, the empire that sent 1 million men against his small nation and nearly everyone who fought beside him. He remains to this day the deadliest sniper in recorded military history, a record that has never been surpassed. That record was forged not by superior technology, but by mastery of terrain, patience, and complete stillness. An entire army once came to fear the empty white space around them, uncertain of what silence might be hiding. In the end, the forests of Kollaa remembered what history books would take decades to fully confirm, that in the right hands, silence itself could become the most devastating weapon of the entire Winter War.